The story begins with a girl who wanted to improve the school charter and fulfill the wish given to the students. She thought about this plan for a long time, imagining how life in the educational institution would change after the amendments were made. The guy who always supported her initiatives carefully prepared the documents, collecting evidence and arguments so that their proposal would look convincing. In this world, as in any other, there were people who were constantly in the spotlight, those to whom glances and opportunities themselves were drawn. The protagonist was an ordinary, unremarkable high school student whose presence was rarely noticed by anyone. Even when something unusual was happening around him, he remained unnoticed, and the only sign of what was happening was the cries of birds outside the window. Deep down, he still hoped that someday his life would become more interesting, filled with bright events and changes. One day, someone took his umbrella, but it was a stranger who could not take it after all. There was no need to create trouble for yourself. This minor everyday situation left him with a feeling of sadness and helplessness. He did not know how to cast spells, did not have any special talents, and could only wait for something to change itself. A girl unexpectedly approached him and politely explained that all students must leave the school, since classes were already over. He nodded and was about to leave, but he was stopped by Kazuki, who handed him a spare umbrella with a kind smile. The three of them decided to walk home together, although the protagonist was internally worried that such company would cause envy among those around him. On the way, Yusato, that's what they decided to call him, using his last name, awkwardly admitted that he didn't expect such friendliness. He usually only communicated with girls, and somehow things didn't work out with guys. Susan, who was walking next to him, was offended by these words. She considered herself the most ordinary high school student, and did not understand why she was called unapproachable. Kazuki and the others immediately began to refute her, pointing out her success in sports, excellent studies and attractive appearance, combined with a kind character. It became clear that she and Kazuki were not dating, but spent a lot of time together because of common affairs and interests. The girls started a conversation about the future, asking Yusato what he planned to do after school. He honestly admitted that he had not thought about it yet. To her surprise, Susan herself had no clear plans either, although she was finishing her studies this year and was used to quickly achieving any goals. At that moment, the protagonist caught himself thinking that sometimes she looked as if she should live somewhere else brighter and more unusual. Suddenly, a strange sound was heard nearby, forcing them to stop. It resembled bells and gradually increased in volume, becoming louder. Curiously, only Yusato did not hear it. The next moment, an unfamiliar guy appeared in front of them, and a magic circle flashed under their feet. Susan was indescribably delighted. Her dreams of another world with monsters, magic and adventures seemed to be coming true. When Yusato opened his eyes, he was awakened by the voices of his friends. They were in a luxurious palace, surrounded by strangers in strange clothes. Kazuki woke up first and woke up the others. Susan was on cloud 9, looking around the new place with shining eyes. King Lloyd, who was sitting on the throne, began to speak, understanding their confusion. Hearing that the Real King was in front of them, Susan's smile widened. The monarch explained that they were not summoned by chance, they were to become heroes. 2 years ago, the kingdom was attacked by the ruler of demons, who invaded with a huge army. Miraculously, they managed to fight back, but at the cost of using a forbidden ritual, which transferred the boys to this world. Susan even slapped her thigh in delight, not hiding her joy. Kazuki demanded that they be returned back, but received a disappointing answer. The portal only worked in one direction. He was furious at the injustice. After all, his family was waiting for him at home. However, the king knelt down, begging for help and promising to eventually find a way to return them. Advisor Wellesley added that the magic circle itself chooses the worthy, and the sound of the bells meant that they were chosen. To test their abilities, they were brought to a magic ball. When Susan touched it, the ball turned yellow. This meant that he had mastered thunder magic with a huge supply of mana. Kazuki's ball glowed white, the rarest light magic, capable of dispelling evil. When Yusato touched the ball, it flashed green, causing a commotion among those present. He was immediately led away through the long corridors of the palace, muttering something about a rare gift. In the throne room, the king was informed of the unusual results, deciding to place the young man in a safe place. At that moment, the door swung open with a bang, and Rose, the manager of the royal rescue team, burst into the room. After a short meeting, they decided to let Yusato rest, but he asked about the meaning of the green color. Rose stopped abruptly, turned around and grabbed his hand, declaring that she would make a healer magician out of him. Wellesley tried to intervene by creating a magic ball, but Rose deftly intercepted it, demonstrating an impressive reaction. Meanwhile, the friends were explained that there were very few healers in the kingdom, and Rose's training methods were peculiar. Yusato was taken to the rescue brigade barracks, where Rose briefly introduced him to his new colleagues. The other 2 healers worked elsewhere, so the training fell entirely on her shoulders. The subordinates only glanced meaningfully at each other, whispering that the guy wouldn't be well. Sitting at the common table, Rose announced that this was now his new home. The approaching colleagues began to introduce themselves, explaining that they themselves did not possess healing magic. They looked sympathetically at the newcomer, knowing full well what awaited him. The mistress was famous for her harsh training methods. "You're finished," was all one of them could mutter while Rose enthusiastically described the future training. The protagonist woke up with a feeling of unreality of what was happening, at first thinking that it was all a strange dream. However, gradually it began to dawn on him that he really was in another world, full of magic and incredible possibilities. His worried friends ran to him. They were told that he had been kidnapped, and they had been worried about his fate all this time. Yusato, looking around and collecting his thoughts, decided that he would complete the training to bring real benefit to this unusual world. The three of them agreed that everyone would try their best in their training to master new abilities faster. The door swung open with a bang, and Rose entered, decisively throwing a thick diary into his hands. She ordered him to meticulously fill it out every day, writing down the schedule, his feelings and progress in training, and the training itself was to begin immediately after breakfast. Everyone around was whispering that studying with Rose was a real hell, but the main character did not yet understand how true it was. A strange warmth appeared in his chest. This was his new power, which he had to learn to work with, extract, and control. As a small relief, he was given a special book that allowed him to understand the local language. All heroes summoned to this world received such a translation ability. Then he was shown a huge map, where the borders of the kingdom and the gloomy lands captured by demons were marked in bright colors. The second day began with an exhausting run, not at all what Yusato expected, who imagined learning magic completely differently. On the third day, history repeated itself. He ran until his legs literally stopped obeying him and buckled from fatigue. Rose unceremoniously hit him on the legs with a stick, not allowing him to stop, but later it turned out that in such a strange way she stimulated his muscle healing abilities. The fourth day was spent in the company of other students, who teased him good-naturedly about his slowness and clumsiness. The fifth day was devoted to running again. By the seventh day, Rose's patience had run out. She dealt him several hefty blows to the stomach, irritably declaring that he was getting on her nerves. In a fit of rage, she even threw him into the air, causing him to almost hit the ceiling. That evening, Yusato wrote in his diary that his mentor was a real beast in human form. The eighth day brought no progress, leaving him at a loss. But on the ninth day, a miracle happened. For the first time, he was able to heal his own wounds, although he doubted whether he was doing it right. And on the 10th day, the healing magic finally began to obey him of its own accord, allowing him to run as much as needed. Rose, noticing this, immediately ordered him to do 3 more laps, and faster. The 11th day brought a long-awaited variety. Instead of running, there were push-ups. As Rose explained, running was necessary so that he could quickly get to the wounded on the battlefield, and physical strength was needed to carry the injured. On the 12th day, he combined running with push-ups, noting with surprise that his body had become lighter and more resilient. Rose immediately noticed this, and made the task more difficult by attaching weights to him. The 14th day was memorable for the theft of his lunch. It turned out that Tong, one of his fellow soldiers, ate it. In a rage, Yusato began throwing mugs at the thief and chasing him around the camp, taking revenge for the stolen food. Unexpectedly, this helped him instantly adapt to the weights. On the 21st day, his friends visited him. They found a picture, Yusato, sweaty and tense, lifting a huge stone, and Rose stood nearby and shouted at him. Not to whine about nonsense. The guy just clicked his tongue, declaring that the stone was too light. An angry Rose brought another one, which he was also able to lift, and even do push-ups with it. Susan couldn't hold back her drool at the sight of his pumped-up arms, but Siglise pulled her back in time, saving the boy's bright future. Rose proudly announced that he would now be her right hand, and most importantly, he passed all the tests. He was finally allowed to rest and have lunch with his friends. Sitting under a tree, they told him about the man who taught them fencing. They were joined by Celia, a girl from the royal family, who brought a homemade pie as a gift in the hope that they would like it. Yusato admitted to Kazuki that not every day the training was so hard, and today's was relatively easy. It turned out that the friends' training was also difficult, but their commander at least took into account the physical condition of his charges. Susan, unable to hold back, lifted his t-shirt to admire the relief muscles that she really wanted to touch. Yusato began to realize that training was becoming interesting in its own way, and that life here wasn't so bad. Tong suddenly showed up with lunch, pretending to be doing a great favor. An argument immediately broke out between them over the lunch that had been stolen earlier. Kazuki, unable to sit idle, went to the castle for additional training. Susan, on the other hand, thought that it was no coincidence that the three of them had ended up in this world. In the evening, Yusato was lounging in the bath, thinking about how nice it was to see his friends. They were right, his body had really changed, becoming stronger and faster. Now he understood that in order to save the wounded in battle, you need not only fast legs, but also a strong psyche. Suddenly, a backpack flew through the door. This was Rose, making it clear that it was time to go on a journey. Guard Thomas trembled at the sight of the girl, although she simply wanted to show the student the outside world. On the spot, Rose set a condition: he would not return until he caught a large pencil. Yusato began to object, remembering from books how dangerous these monsters were. But for these objections, he immediately soared into the sky, thrown up by an enraged mentor. During the flight, the protagonist panicked and activated healing magic, creating a protective aura around himself to soften the impact with the ground and not crash to death. Having landed with a dull thud on the soft forest floor, he simply lies for a few minutes, happy to be alive, then rises with difficulty and begins to heal the bruises and abrasions received during the fall. A huge polar bear with glowing yellow eyes and a bared mouth, clearly in an aggressive mood, suddenly appears near him. He starts to run, desperately making his way through the bushes, but the monstrous animals easily catch up with him, their powerful paws easily overcoming any obstacles. Yusato stops abruptly, deciding to fight back, but at that moment 2 more bears emerge from the thicket, surrounding him from all sides. In desperation, he makes an instant decision to jump into the nearest fountain, hoping that the water barrier will stop his pursuers. The bears really do not dare to climb into the water and after long circles leave, but now the hero is wet and shivering from the cold. Evening comes, and with trembling hands he hangs his wet clothes on the branches, simultaneously looking through the contents of the hiking backpack that Rose gave him. To his disappointment, he does not find any flint or tinder there, nothing that could help make a saving fire. From the depths of the forest come strange, frightening sounds, either a howl or a grinding, forcing him to peer tensely into the darkness. On the trunk of the nearest tree he makes the first notch, a symbol of the fact that he managed to survive in this dangerous place for at least one day. The morning greets him with a cold fog, and he adds another mark on the tree, marking the beginning of a new test. Before moving on, he decides to find out exactly where the bears live in order to avoid another meeting. On the neighboring trees he notices deep scratches from powerful claws, clear signs of bear territory. Suddenly strange sounds are heard from the bushes, and a wounded hare appears with a bloody paw, looking at him pitifully. The protagonist, overcoming his fear, carefully approaches and heals the animal, after which he quickly retreats, but to his surprise, the hare begins to follow him on his heels. Then, unexpectedly, the hare abruptly changes direction and runs to the side, energetically calling him to follow straight to the bear's den, where a whole bear family with cubs is peacefully resting among bones and skins. His stomach starts to hurt terribly from drinking water from the fountain earlier, and even healing magic helps only partially, not completely relieving the excruciating spasms. The hare, as if understanding his condition, leads him to another clean spring, where the water turns out to be crystal clear and pleasant to the taste, but their peaceful respite is disturbed by a huge snake with shimmering scales that appears out of nowhere. For long days pass, during which Yusato continues to carefully observe the bear family, studying their habits and routes. On the 5th day, the hare begins to behave strangely, as if warning him not to go anywhere. When the pouring rain ends, he returns to the bear's den and freezes in horror. The entire family has been brutally murdered, and the nature of the wounds makes it clear that this is the work of that very snake, and the murder was committed not for food, but clearly for cruel entertainment. It turns out that the cubs miraculously escaped, hiding among the rocks, and now come out to the lifeless bodies of their parents, whining pitifully. The protagonist feels rage boiling in his chest. This sight is unbearable for him, and he swears to avenge the innocent animals. Meanwhile, his friends come to visit him, but find that he has been missing for 10 days, and Rosa herself is also missing. Kazuki falls into a rage, clenching his fists. He sincerely worries about his comrade, because they all believed in him and hoped for his return. The protagonist, meanwhile, methodically prepares for the fight. He does stretching, drinks water from a clean spring and sharpens a homemade spear, which he made from a strong branch. The faithful hare leads him straight to the serpent's lair, where they find a little bear cub, determined to avenge his murdered parents. At the decisive moment, Yusato rushes to attack, plunging his spear into the monster's eye, but the weapon breaks on a nearby tree. The snake bites his hand in rage, causing hellish pain, but he continues to heal himself with all his might, simultaneously trying to plunge the knife deeper. The poison penetrates his blood, clouding his consciousness, but his training with Rose was not in vain. He continues to fight, activating his healing again and again. The bear cub distracts the snake by clinging to it, and the hero uses this moment to climb onto the snake's head and hit it on the skull with all his might. When the snake finally falls lifeless, he collapses on the ground, trying to catch his breath, covered in blood and poison. The bear cub rubs against him gratefully, as if realizing that this man helped him carry out his revenge. But suddenly the dead snake starts moving again, preparing for the final blow, and at that moment Rose appears, finishing off the monster with one precise blow. It turns out that the hare managed to call her for help. Later it turns out that this monster was created specifically for the army of the Prince of Darkness, and during the last invasion they could not kill it, and it escaped into the forest. Rose looks at her student with unexpected pride. She liked how he fought in this dangerous forest, and she deliberately watched him from afar, testing his abilities. The bear cub is angry at first when they try to calm him down with strokes, but gradually calms down. In the end, they decide to take him with them. Rose, with feigned severity, asks about all the insults he wrote in his diary, and as a punishment, she declares that she will not let him sleep today. But approval is read in her eyes. She realizes that Yasato is really ready to stand shoulder to shoulder with her on the battlefield, because he has proven that he is able to endure pain and has a strong psyche. At this moment, alarming news comes: the army of darkness will really soon attack the kingdom again, and now they all face a real test. Rose, crossing her arms over her chest, explains their position to the protagonist. They are the vanguard, while the other two healers from their squad have completely different tasks and areas of responsibility. The girl goes to the king with a report, confidently declaring that everything is moving strictly according to plan. The troops have already completed the main preparations and will soon be completely ready to march. The monarch, sitting on the throne with a gloomy expression on his face, asks them to give it their all, but at the same time especially emphasizes that the most important thing is to stay alive, because every experienced fighter is now worth his weight in gold. At this point, Hayuraluk approaches Rose, but she abruptly interrupts him, demanding that he not interfere and spend time on work, because there are only a few days left before the decisive battle. The scientist mutters that he will soon finish the prototype of a new monster created for the war. These creatures are poisonous, huge, with razor-sharp fangs, and the new model is almost identical to the one that escaped earlier after being wounded. Meanwhile, strange people appear on the battlefield who do not take part in the battles, but only watch from the sidelines, arousing suspicion. Rose, meanwhile, rushes across the entire front line, becoming a real nightmare for enemies. Her speed and fury in battle inspire horror. However, Amila, one of the commanders, is forbidden to fight personally, so he sends a Black Knight in his place, an immortal sorcerer, whose appearance changes the balance of power. The main character, meanwhile, finally gets a long-awaited rest and stretches out with pleasure on the bed, which he incredibly missed all this time. He visits the bear cub, bringing him food from the canteen, simple but tasty food, which the animal gobbles up. Suddenly, the same hare that initially betrayed him appears, but because of the incredible cuteness of the furry trader, the hero cannot resist and treats him to a vegetable. Rosa bursts into the room and hears the protagonist calling the bear Sigri. The girl, to everyone's surprise, not only does not swear, but also officially reports the bear to the command, after which she receives permission to leave the animal in the detachment's property on the condition that it will work for its bread. To test the capabilities of the new fighter, Rosa places the bear on the protagonist's back, like a wounded soldier, and makes him run with this burden. Suddenly, they begin to attack, simulating a real attack. Stones fly, screams are heard, a complete illusion of battle is created. An hour of training later, a smelly liquid is poured on the hero, checking his reaction to chemical attacks. 3 hours later, they throw logs at him, forcing him to dodge. Eventually, the completely exhausted guy falls with the bear, and Rosa notes that he is exhausted not so much from physical fatigue as from constant fear and fuss. After a short rest, the protagonist runs with the bear through the city, where Sigri suddenly notices a fruit stand. The townspeople, to their surprise, are not scared. They immediately understand that these are representatives of the rescue team by their characteristic clothing, and such runs are a familiar sight for them. One of the merchants even gives the bear a fruit as a sign of acquaintance. They decide to look in on their friends, but suddenly hear screams behind them. Someone is running and trying to stop them. It turns out that this is Org, a healer from their team, who heals people on the stairs since his own knee hurts. The guy admits that he never thought he would become a hero. He and his sister, also a healer, could hardly stand Rose's harsh methods. Org explains that he works in the city, since he does not know how to heal himself, and all the seriously injured are taken to the rear, where he and his sister provide assistance. Without such healers, he emphasizes, many fighters could die right on the battlefield, although the work is extremely tiring. After a warm conversation, they say goodbye, and the ally is sincerely glad that Rose has finally found a worthy subordinate. Org's worried sister runs up to him, and he tells her about the hero he met. Meanwhile, Yasato receives permission to go to the royal part of the castle, where Susan is training. He proudly tells that he has undergone special training and even found a bear. The girl enthusiastically asks to touch the beast, but Sigri turns out to be shy. He begins to suck her hand, not wanting to let go. He even has to heal small abrasions on the girl's hand, left after intensive fencing lessons. Susan is touched that the hero came especially for her, and sadly notes that Kazuki is not around. He went to field training to gain combat experience. Siglise, watching this scene, is glad that now they have real heroes. The team's fighting spirit literally soared to the skies. The idol is broken by the appearance of red wolves, special creatures that the main character was ordered to kill as a test. Susan explains that he will go on a mission for several days, and then the girl herself will go into battle, and she already feels anticipation of the upcoming events. The main character cannot hide his concern for her. There is too much uncertainty in this war. After a touching farewell, the girl is surprised to realize that now they can freely communicate without the former constraint. The hero himself firmly decides that he will help them in the war for real, and not sit in the rear while his friends risk their lives. He is no longer the timid person he used to be. Night falls, and Rose, finding him doing additional exercises, asks about the reasons for such zeal. He admits that today, for the first time, he truly felt the strength of the enemy he may not be able to kill, but he is able to help and heal, and this is his place in the rescue team. At this moment, for the first time, he feels like a full-fledged part of the team, realizing that everything is going as it should. Suddenly, Rose says that the guy is urgently called. He has to join Susan's field exercises, which becomes a new turn in his training and a test of all the skills he has acquired. He needed to go with the girl, because he was asked, but when Kazuki went, she refused, because he had just returned and was still too weak after a long absence. Yesterday the king called her again, and she could not refuse a second time, realizing that it would look like direct disobedience. He is going with Sigri, because during this time he has become very attached to her, feeling some kind of invisible connection between them. An experienced knight in worn armor and a young sorceress with a mysterious look will also go with them. Rose strictly asks not to overestimate the healing magic, because they do not know how to resurrect the dead, and besides, Siglis himself trained them, so there is no need to worry. Once again he knows what he is doing. Celia unexpectedly comes to the guy, who has been training hard, although he has just returned from grueling field exercises, covered in dust and sweat. Susan says with a smile that her ally has been very tired over the past few days, but despite his fatigue, he was sincerely glad to gain such invaluable experience, and now they are going there together. The girl decides to touch him while he sleeps, curious, but she is abruptly stopped and even slapped on the hands so as not to disturb his peace. Sigri wakes up from the noise, and he is dryly told to go himself, but he, lazily stretching, decided to ride on the same girl who could not understand what they wanted from her at all. Corin suddenly feels that there are many unfriendly creatures lurking ahead, whose presence is felt as cold goosebumps on the back. Rough bandits, overgrown and with dull eyes, unexpectedly come out to them, and they brazenly demand to lay out all the jewelry, threatening with sharp blades. Susan, however, is not afraid at all and is even happy, because she did not even know that such interesting characters live in these forests. Seeing a bear that suddenly appeared nearby, they are scared at first, but then, looking closer, they realize that it is just a child, albeit a large one. The girl makes a sharp blow to the nearest robber so that he does not go where he should not, and in general here you can finally give full play to your skills. Wild boars also suddenly ran to them, and they all flew into the air because they crashed into them at full speed. They fall into cold water, and Yusato is surprised to realize that this is the same waterfall that the old maps told them about. The girl grabs the guy by the hand and tries to help him, but then, losing her balance, awkwardly throws him onto the rocky floor of the cave. He silently heals her wounds, while they apologize to him guiltily, muttering something unintelligible. Sorting through the remains of the food, they realize with disappointment that there is almost no food, and they urgently need to hide somewhere for the night, and with the first rays of the sun move on. We learn that the girl was once from a very rich family and never in her life needed anything, not even imagining what it was like to starve or freeze. They decide to spend the night in a nearby cave, which is damp but at least protected from the wind. Susan moves away and strictly asks not to peek while she changes into dry clothes. After that, she skillfully catches fish from a nearby stream and makes a small fire, which, despite its modest size, gives off a pleasant warmth. Suddenly, poisonous monkeys with red eyes come out to them, bite her hand, and she falls, feeling the poison quickly spreading throughout her body. Meanwhile, in the palace, they excitedly say that 2 people have gone missing, and they are hastily assembling a search party. Rose abruptly stops the guy so that he does not go anywhere, assuring him that there is nothing to worry about, because her best subordinate is there, who will definitely cope. Yusato goes to bed first, while the girl quietly asks his opinion about the fact that they were accidentally teleported here. The guy honestly admits that he himself does not know if he wants to go back, and she did not want to go back at all. Susan could easily give up everything and not come back, because nothing held her back in the past, and here she finally found the freedom she desired. The protagonist does not blame her, because he himself has long wanted to change his boring everyday life, and it turns out that they are very similar in this. When they first got here, the guy was constantly thinking about how to stop being a burden to others, and now he is a proud member of the rescue team and has firmly decided to protect everyone around him. She softly says that she does not want empty admiration, because sincere close relationships are much more valuable to her. The protagonist, embarrassed, quickly decides to sleep to avoid further revelations. They seemed to be going where they needed to, but were still unsure of the correctness of the path. Sigri, who finally found them, unexpectedly comes to them, and then the rest of the guys appear, one of whom immediately falls from fatigue. Aruku excitedly tells how they tried to find them, but the bear suddenly ran towards some strange smell, and they just followed him. The bear suddenly turned in another direction, where, as it turned out, was his old den, and he clearly missed his parents, whom he had not seen for a long time. After that they, having rested a little, decide to return to where their real place is, because the adventures are not over yet. The king was sincerely happy to see that they returned safe and sound, and even apologized to Yasato for dragging him into this dangerous undertaking, although he understood that there was no other choice. Lloyd was enthusiastically told that everything was going well in training, and he really liked everything. He felt more confident every day. Rose smiled slightly to the side, because everything was going strictly according to her well-thought-out plan, and not a single detail was out of line with what was intended. Susan was persistently forced to rest, despite her resistance, because the field training would be later anyway, and now she needed strength. Kazuki quickly ran with the girl towards them, his face expressing anxiety. They disappeared just during the sudden attack of those very monsters that everyone had been talking about for so long. Celia, sighing heavily, says that the guy was about to run away from his post and start his own search, unable to wait any longer. Yusato wanted to tell everyone about the poisonous monkeys, but his mouth was suddenly covered with a hand so that he would remain silent and not sow unnecessary panic. Kazuki, still out of breath, explains that Rose strictly did not allow him to follow them, although he was eager to fight. The protagonist suddenly realizes that she said this on purpose, because the forest they went to was on an easy difficulty level, and he quietly asked Kazuki to keep his bright soul, not turning into the same cynical person as they are. They say goodbye warmly, knowing that they will see each other again soon, and this time without unnecessary danger. Celia smiles and notices that he looks very happy next to him, and that is really cool, because they are, after all, from the same world, and this creates a special bond between them. She suddenly asks to call her differently, less formally. She likes it that way, and there is something warm in her eyes. Sergio, crossing his arms, gloomily tells that they interrogated the captured bandits, and they claimed that they were coming from a distant pasture, where there used to be few monsters, and then they were suddenly attacked from the forest. If they were telling the truth, it meant that the monsters changed direction and would have done so only in one case: if they were being driven by something more terrible, for example, demons. The king, clenching his fists, orders all the soldiers to be prepared and, if something happens, to immediately attack. They can no longer wait. Rose is personally asked to find out where the army of the Prince of Darkness is now. After all, she is the fastest of them, and only she can get this information without unnecessary risk. Lloyd, jumping up hotly, asks to be trusted to lead the troops into battle, because he is the only healer who has achieved such heights in his skill, but he is dryly refused. He is too valuable to risk. She has long come to terms with the death of those people from the past. She clearly understands that she cannot resurrect the dead, and the scar on her eye will be an eternal reminder of this. She blamed only herself, because it was her conceit that then led to the catastrophe, and this scar is a punishment so that she never forgets her sin. She has long wanted to get an immortal subordinate, and that is why grueling training is so important now, so that he has not only strength, but also a strong psyche, and everything else that will make him an ideal weapon. Yusato, without knowing it, turned out to be the perfect candidate. His survival instinct, phenomenal adaptability, and incredible will to live, because he hated losing. And no matter what happened, he still remained rebellious, stubborn, just like the man who once died in her arms, never giving up. Yusato is unexpectedly given a pack of mail. There will be no classes tomorrow, and he is instructed to deliver an important letter to a specified location, although he does not understand why he was chosen. Amila, meanwhile, coldly commands people, forcing them to carry heavy logs, and indifferently throws out that they should do her will until they die. There is not a drop of pity in her voice. He decides to talk to this strange girl, because he still cannot understand what secret is hidden behind her enigmatic behavior. She is standing by the window, pressing her forehead to the cold glass, and in her eyes you can read boundless hope, as if only he can change her fate. Rose bursts into the room with a sharp movement, grabs him by the head with her tenacious fingers and throws him hard onto the bed, without deigning to explain. All these days she has been conducting dangerous reconnaissance at the very borders, where the army of darkness is already building a massive bridge for invasion, although there is no immediate threat yet. The story of Amaki emerges in Rose's memory. She appeared 2 years ago, exhausted and scared, having miraculously escaped from slave traders, although now she was barely 12. The kidnappers considered Beastborn as living goods, some for their unearthly beauty, others for their rare magical abilities. There are rumors in the kingdom that among their kind there are seers, but such unique individuals carefully hide under the protection of the strongest warriors. The girl goes to the king with a report, ordering the guy to stay put. Lloyd, with trembling hands clutching the edge of the table, begs forgiveness for his rash order and thanks for delaying the enemy forces. Work on the bridge is in full swing. There are only a few days left before the invasion. In the hallway, they run into Celia, who hurries them to their waiting father. Tong's loud snores echo throughout the room, and the protagonist tosses and turns in bed, unable to drive away thoughts of that girl. Only he, it seems, is able to rewrite the predetermined future. 3 mysterious lights flicker outside the window, and looking out, he sees Kazuki, also awake. Silently sitting on a frost-covered stone, they understand each other without words. Kazuki, nervously tugging at his sleeve, tells about the summons to the king. The war with the Prince of Darkness is inevitable. He always knew that this would happen, but the strange joy of the warrior girl confuses him. Thoughts about the upcoming battle do not give him peace, his legs themselves brought him here. Confession is hard. Kazuki is terrified of a real fight. Mock battles tore off his rose-colored glasses, showing the true horror of war. Yusato realizes the burden of responsibility. Everyone is waiting for something, placing unreasonable hopes. The decision matures suddenly. He will go and save, despite the fear. His appearance in this world was not accidental. There are too many oddities now. He must protect these people. Kazuki sharply slaps himself on the cheeks, making a decision. He will protect his friends, go forward no matter what. Silent departure is accompanied by a stingy wish for a good night. Susan appears despite the ban. Her anxiety is read in every gesture, but now is not the time for talking. Lloyd, having lined up the warriors, announces the approach of the army of darkness. The enemy has become stronger, but now they have heroes from another world. The rescue team will work on the battlefield. Confidence in victory does not leave him. The royal army is trained and numerous. Tomorrow at dawn they will set out. Kazuki comes to say goodbye to the princess before his first battle. The evening is filled with anxious silence. Yururu reaches for the bear cub, but her trembling hand is pushed away, forbidding her to even pet the hare. Or drops the heavy box, unable to cope with the load. The tension before the battle constrains her movements. Yururu, for whom this is her first battle, tries to find at least some peace. Rose calls the protagonist for the final briefing. The wounded will be delivered to the rear. It is forbidden to go out onto the battlefield. In the rear, they will have to instantly assess the severity of the wounds, deciding who to help first. The special uniform from the box fits perfectly. Months of training were not in vain. Rose's icy voice reminds healers are mortal. His life is priceless. You can't risk it thoughtlessly. Yusato nods, full of determination. He will cope, no matter what. Rose begins her story with her arms crossed over her chest, explaining that demons look very much like ordinary people, except for the terrifying horns on their heads, but their physical strength is many times greater than that of humans, as well as their magical abilities, making them extremely dangerous opponents. 5 days ago, the king personally thanked everyone gathered, reporting that demons had already been seen near the borders, but so far they had not shown aggression. But to be on the safe side, all trade caravans must now be accompanied by armed guards. She suggests that this is clearly preparation for a large-scale invasion, and the enemy can appear at any moment, so they need to be in full combat readiness. All is sharply hit on the head, rudely ordered to shut up and stop eavesdropping on secret military meetings. Apparently she still has not understood the true importance of these closed meetings. Rose patiently explains that underestimating the enemy is a deadly mistake, and a decision has already been made to hold evening training for all warriors to maintain fighting shape. Everyone greeted this news without much enthusiasm, continuing to do their own thing until they heard the order. The warriors were clearly angry, because they were forced to train after a period of relative calm, when many had time to relax. After a week of tense anticipation, it became clear that demons had begun systematically attacking local creatures, and Rose was urgently asked to personally assess the situation, using her power to protect herself if necessary. The girl gathers her subordinates, announcing that they need to move out immediately. In the morning they will be going against a squad of about 30 demons. After much debate, they decide to leave the hare in the safety of the house. Although it would be easier to scout with him, the demons can specifically target him, and no one wants to risk such a valuable ally. Rose explains the combat mission, emphasizing that they must go fully armed, and so she personally joins the squad to support. Everyone immediately perked up, happy that they are going into battle under her leadership, and are now determined to completely defeat the enemy, without mercy. They traveled all night and morning to reach the designated area by the appointed time. At night by the fire, with the flames illuminating their tired faces, the girl announces a new plan. Tomorrow they will go west on foot, and the horses will remain here under guard. Gilgu only nods in agreement, realizing that the decision has already been made and there is nothing to discuss. By the crackling fire, they decide to take turns keeping watch at night, but in the end, everyone unexpectedly runs off to do their own thing, breaking the agreement. Rosa notices that her friend All is not sleeping, and offers to help, seeing her anxiety. A frank conversation begins between them, where Rosa admits that no one has complained about All. She fills out all the documents perfectly, without mistakes, and therefore copes well with the duties of a deputy, and in the future, she can become a full-fledged commander. All resists this idea, afraid that her comrades in arms can beat her up in protest against such an appointment. In fact, she always followed orders without question, defended what she thought was right, even against the opinion of the majority. That's how she made it into the ranks of the elite warriors. Then there was a meeting with Rose, and everything went wrong. She was beaten during training, not taken seriously. At that time, she did not want to give up, not letting defeats get the upper hand, although she did not show outstanding results during regular training. All passionately proves that only she can be their real commander, and no one else can cope with this role. Rose in response gives her a friendly flick, smirking. This whole situation looks strange, and it was not by chance that she chose All as her deputy. It was a conscious decision, and now there is no way back. She does not intend to retreat. If all continues to behave with the same confidence as now, the rest of the warriors will inevitably follow her, recognizing the leadership. The girl asks them to remember an important truth: nothing lasts forever under the moon, everything changes sooner or later, and they shouldn't dwell on problems too much. Rose decides that it's time to sleep, and loudly commands everyone to go and rest so that they can be fresh in the morning. The guys exchange glances and smile, admitting that they have no personal animosity towards all, and when necessary, they are ready to obey her. Hearing this, all rushes after them with a scream to beat them up for such words addressed to him. Fresh traces of blood and boot prints were clearly visible on the ground, clear signs that the demons were indeed hunting the local creatures. They rushed towards the sound of a sudden scream, instantly hiding in the nearest bushes when they realized that the wolves were being driven into cages. Waiting for the right moment, they came out of hiding, and Rosa boldly walked towards the enemy to demand an explanation for the attacks on defenseless creatures. Nero, the demon with cold eyes, understood that he could not leave the witnesses alive, and was already preparing to kill everyone to cover up the crime. All immediately takes command, because in battle, a commander cannot give orders and fight at the same time. All the warriors rush into battle without hesitation. Nero creates a deadly wind curse, but Rosa manages to get close and deliver a powerful kick, breaking his concentration. She pursues the retreating demon, grabs a heavy log and throws it at his feet to block his retreat. The last thrown log hits the target exactly, but the demon manages to split it from the inside with a magical explosion. The warriors try to strike, but the demon deftly dodges all attacks. Then he creates razor-sharp air blades, but Rosa neutralizes them with a protective healing spell. In rage, Nero draws a blood-red sword and deals a crushing blow in her direction. The guys make different attacks and create magic to kill the enemy, using all their strength and skills that they have developed over the years. Rosa still fought, not giving up, despite her fatigue and wounds, and her sword was cursed, emitting an ominous glow, and it was impossible to touch it, otherwise the curse will pass on to whoever dares to pick it up. Nero flies to the battle, leaving a bloody trail behind him, and the girl flies to him like an angel of vengeance, because for him, all hits are just scratches, unable to stop his demonic essence. Who would have thought that a simple hunt for animals, which seemed like a normal task, would become so bloody and cruel, and his allies, whom he trained for years, were weak at the moment, not ready for the real horror of war. He praised her, grinning, because this was the first squad he fought with like this, and there were no heroes among the people, because there are no people in the world with great strength that can compare with demons. Now he thinks differently, gritting his teeth in anger, because this is an obstacle to their goal, and their prince, powerful and merciless, will soon awaken from his sleep. For the sake of the prince, they must kill people, wipe them off the face of the earth, to clear the way for a new order. The enemy took the girl by the hand with an iron grip and simply did not let go, squeezing so that the bones cracked under the pressure. Eventually Naruka is killed and falls to the ground, her body limp and her eyes dull, everyone in complete shock, not believing what happened. The demons began to kill everyone in a row, not distinguishing between the elderly and children, but the people tried to resist, although they understood that there was almost no chance. Nero explains, crossing his arms over his chest, that he made the fight desecrate, turning it into a massacre, and wants to throw her off track, depriving her of her last hope. Rose is wounded in the eye, and his demonic blade, imbued with darkness, does not allow her to heal temporarily, leaving a burning pain. The girl runs to him, gritting her teeth, because her allies are wounded and killed one after another, who asked her to leave to save themselves, but she is wounded in the leg, causing her to stumble. Nero decides to end this battle and hits her in the chest, channeling all his anger into this blow, but all runs in, sacrificing himself, and takes the blow. Rosa falls to her knees, her hands shaking, and she looks at the pile of corpses, remembering her guys who wanted to fight with all their might, giving everything of themselves, and they believed in her until their last breath. Nero decides not to forget the death of his subordinates and enemies, bowing his head, and now asks her to disappear, pointing to the darkening horizon. She takes the sword, feeling its weight, and puts it away, then hits him on the cheek, because he is a non-entity, and does not understand anything about their pain and loss. After that, she throws him on the ground with such force that he bounces off, because he does not understand that for them this would be the greatest happiness just to live. Nero lands near a tree, wincing in pain, and his own sword is thrown at him, piercing his chest, leaving a bloody trail. Amila comes out, her face pale with horror, to help him, but she was asked not to meddle where she shouldn't, because this is not her battle. She wants to stop them, holding out her hands, but she remembers all, because she was like this girl, just as naive and believing in goodness. Rosa falls to her knees, her body numb with grief, and punches the ground with her fists when all called her, and the healing magic did not work on her, as if the universe itself had turned away. She did not regret anything, like her allies, asking to remain the same person. She was strong and kind. Rosa looks at the killed allies, their faces frozen in their last emotions, and simply screams throughout the forest from pain that cannot be expressed in words. Lloyd is told the report that the demons will attack them soon, and the hunt for the creatures was the same goal, to distract them in order to deliver the decisive blow. Rose asks to be relieved of her command, her voice trembling, and leaves, leaving silence behind her. The parents of one of the allies come to her, their eyes full of tears, and they thank her for returning home, because he had a contented face, and they are very grateful to her for the fact that he died as a hero. The girl sits in the corner, hugging her knees, and squeezes her shoulder, as if trying to keep herself from falling into the abyss of despair. A month later, her friends come to her, because she has not left the house for a long time, and generally wants to commit suicide, seeing no point in further life. Siglis takes her clothes, his eyes are full of determination, and immediately removes them, realizing that words are powerless here. She does not remove the scar, because this is her punishment for not helping the allies, and is not going to die so as not to betray their memory. Rose sits down at the table, her hands shaking, and she imagines her allies laughing, eating, smiling and enjoying life as if nothing had happened. She wonders what she should say about the devastation that is eating her from the inside. Suddenly, all comes up, her image clear as life, and says that this is not in her spirit, and let her remember that nothing is permanent, and everything changes, even pain. Lost in thoughts and deaths, Rose completely forgot that they always strived forward, without looking back, and greeted each day with a smile on their faces. All comes out, dissolving in the light, and Rose understands that everything will be fine, and she will become someone who will be admired, as her friends once admired her. She knew what to do, because soon a large-scale battle between people and demons will begin, where many will die, but she wants to create a force so that more people will survive, so that their sacrifices will not be in vain. Yusato is scared when the girl says that it is good that she found him. His eyes widen in surprise. He just did not understand how valuable his existence was, because he always considered himself a nobody. After all, not everyone can be trained like him, and it was she who decided to surpass herself, going beyond her capabilities. There was something that only they can do, and she knows that he will not die, because she will not allow it, just as she would not allow the death of others if she could. People were doing different things, immersed in their daily affairs before the battle. Someone was eating, hastily swallowing food, someone was sleeping, tired after a long march, some were warming themselves by the fire, trying to drive away the night cold. The protagonist left the tent, sighing deeply, because this day, which everyone was waiting and fearing, had come, and now there was nowhere to retreat. Susan got up before everyone else, her movements were precise and collected, and asked about the armor, because it was beautiful, sparkling in the sun, and was created specifically for her skill, so as not to interfere with lightning attacks. In her home world she grew cacti, caring for them with tenderness, and after Yusato said that it was not cute, she began to throw herself at him, angry at such words. Kazuki runs in, hearing the screams, and the girl is removed so that she does not get into a fight before an important battle, because strength needed to be saved. Intelligence reported to them that demons, black shadows on the horizon, will reach the pasture in half an hour, and as soon as they appear, they will attack with magic, not giving time to prepare. The heroes will enter the battle, gritting their teeth, and will make their way to the enemy commander, and if possible, they can defeat him to turn the tide of battle. It turns out that Susan tried to distract herself with the help of Yusato, hiding her fear of the upcoming battle, and Kazuki noticed this, because he saw through people, reading their emotions. Not far from them, the enemies appeared, their silhouettes were visible in the distance, and the magicians decided to prepare, clutching their staffs in their hands. They shoot at the enemies, releasing spells, but it was an illusion, a deception, because the real enemy was coming from the southwest, hiding his strength. Rose orders the people in black clothes, her voice is firm, to look for the wounded and drag them to her, and also to return alive, because every soldier was valuable. 2 healers will be in the tent, ready to work, and they will be protected, but if something happens, then they will need to run away so as not to lose the last healers. And she, together with Yusato, waits for now, watching the battlefield, feeling how the tension is growing with each passing minute. Tom comes with a wounded man, his face pale from pain, although little time has passed, but the battle has already claimed its first victims. The protagonist's hands are shaking when he sees the wound, deep and bloody, and is already starting to heal, because he fell under the snake, whose poison was deadly. The guards are standing near the snake, frozen in indecision, and do not understand what it is at all, because they see such a monster for the first time. The Black Knight watches them, his eyes are burning with a cold fire, and understands that people are weak, not ready for a real war. Suddenly he is pierced through, but he does not even flinch, as if he does not feel pain. The Black Knight says that people are weak, his voice sounds like the grinding of metal, and the man, bleeding, smiles, crawls and throws the stinking liquid, after which he runs away, hiding in the smoke. Lightning flashed not far from him, illuminating the battlefield, and he decides to go there, because he felt something interesting that could entertain him. Now only the brother and sister heal, their hands move quickly, because the guys go to the front, leaving them alone. After that, they run, and Rose was worried about the Black Knight, because he owned dangerous magic, capable of destroying entire squads. The girl says that if he has no choice, then he must defeat the enemy at any cost, even if it costs lives. She orders him to run to the right, pointing with her hand, and she will run to the left, distracting the enemies. Yusato runs near the corpses, his heart squeezes with pain, and then takes the guy to heal him, despite the risk. Rose hits the enemies, her sword sparkles in the air, and then heals others, trying to save as many lives as possible. The main character took two with him, their faces distorted with pain, and healed them, and if something happens, it is better to retreat so as not to die in vain. Susan clears the fighters, her movements are fast and precise, and asks some to retreat, because they are wounded and will not hold out for long. Hazuki hears that there is a dangerous snake ahead, his voice is shaking, and they must clear a path to the enemy commander to finish this. When suddenly, a black knight comes to them, his armor is covered in blood, and he is not like the other demons, his eyes were empty. His guys ran towards him, screaming in rage, and made blows, but they were simply taken and killed as if they were flies. Kazuki is hit, his body shakes and he falls to his knees, blood pouring from his shoulder, soaking his armor. We learn that if you hit the Black Knight, he takes away his strength and strikes the same blow, making him almost invulnerable. The protagonist ran, his legs buckling, and he had memories of his friends dying, and it scared him. A demon attacked him, fangs flashing in the darkness, but the boy managed to defend himself. It was the same one he had healed earlier. Everyone was fighting, their screams merging into one roar, and they decided to defeat the knight, and the girl had a risky idea that could cost them their lives. The knight began to attack, his sword cutting through the air, and the guys ran at him, blinding him with light and striking from all sides. They failed, their bodies shuddered, because they were dealt the same blow, throwing them back. Only the wound on his back was not reflected, small, but giving little hope. Susan began to run quickly, her cloak fluttering in the wind, and the boy realized what she wanted to do, and created a bright light, blinding the enemy. The Black Knight is hit from behind, his armor cracks, and the blow is not reflected, because he does not expect what he does not see. It turns out he was joking, his laugh sounded creepy, and the boys started bleeding from their mouths, and Kazuki was on his knife, pierced through. The girl falls to the ground, her strength leaving her, and mentally asks Yusato for forgiveness, knowing that she let him down. Kazuki smiled widely, congratulating her. After all, it was he who helped the girl at a critical moment, and now even strict teachers trusted her unconditionally, seeing her enormous potential. She noticed a guy standing to the side, leaning discreetly against an old oak tree, and her heart filled with joy that their destinies crossed on that fateful day. It seemed to her not just a coincidence, but a real gift of fate, and she was already making plans for how she would start a new life here, full of incredible adventures. Yusato, experienced and wise, knew exactly how to settle in this strange new world. His rich life experience became their guiding star in this chaos. Suddenly, everyone around began to shout loudly, the voices merged into a deafening roar. Several heroes were already lying lifeless on the battlefield, and the triumphant demons did not hide their joy, celebrating a temporary but sweet victory. The Black Knight, tired of the protracted battle, decided to finally put an end to this exhausting battle. At that moment, the main character rushed towards them, his face covered in sweat and blood, and dealt a crushing blow to the unsuspecting enemy, who collapsed without even having time to understand what had happened. Fortunately, the guys were still breathing, their chests weakly but rhythmically rose, and he managed just in time to prevent the worst thing from happening. Yusato immediately began healing them, his hands glowing with a soft, golden light, while the Black Knight gritted his teeth and muttered that it hurt like hell, the first time in years he had felt truly vulnerable. Before they could catch their breath, the Black Knight was already racing after them, his armor clanking loudly, but his path was desperately blocked by more demons jumping out of the shadows. A razor-sharp sword was suddenly thrown at them, whistling past their heads, almost taking away their last chance. The girl, out of breath, quickly explained the situation, her voice shaking with fatigue, and told them about this unusual enemy they had never encountered before. Yusato, a peace-loving person by nature, did not want to fight, preferring a peaceful solution, but the Black Knight stubbornly interfered, and then he gritted his teeth, determined to stop him at any cost. Surprisingly, the enemy's blows were useless. They seemed to dissolve in the air, causing no harm, but the knight himself was clearly having a hard time. Meanwhile, Kazuki finally came to, his eyelids slowly rose, and he was immediately explained that there was a fight with a knight against whom normal attacks did not work. Perhaps the answer lay in the healing magic, capable of breaking his defense. The sun, as if blessing them, shone brighter, its rays broke through the clouds, and everyone understood they would succeed if they worked together. The Black Knight became furious, his eyes blazed with scarlet fire, and he began to restore the armor, which was tightening right before his eyes, then created a huge sword from the darkness. Yusako, wiping the blood from her face, calmly said that there was no need to worry. The fight was nearing its end, and his goal was unchanged, to protect his own at any cost. They rushed at each other, their cries merging, and delivered decisive blows, from which everything was illuminated by a blinding light. At the culminating moment, the blow reached its target, a grand explosion occurred. It turned out that the healing magic neutralized the armor. This was the same super powerful technique developed with Rose over months of training. The main character rushed to help the others, his hands moving at incredible speed, and the demons fled in panic. As it turned out, this was an ordinary technique, but the healing energy went to attack. This is the unusual method Rose learned. She jokingly said more than once, warming up her fingers, that if they attacked, she would give a worthy rebuff. Maybe she will not kill, but she will definitely make it clear that she is not to be trifled with. Susan, with shining eyes, sincerely thanked him. He, risking his life, saved everyone from death. At that moment, Kazuki ran up, out of breath. It turned out that a giant snake had broken through to the front line, creating a deadly threat. Rose demanded an explanation, crossing her arms. She did not believe that he had managed it alone, and ordered him to go to the base so as not to interfere. She thanked him for surviving. Amila was in shock. The Black Knight was captured, and she ordered a retreat, realizing that her soldiers were powerless, and they were losing the battle of attrition. They stood in front of the serpent. Its huge body was writhing. They needed to defeat it to end the battle. At the base, they were treating and feeding the wounded, restoring their strength. An enraged Tong ran up, shouting that they should not sit around while others were dying. An explosion was heard nearby. They still managed to kill the serpent, although it took a lot of effort. Rose decided not to pursue the enemies, realizing the pointlessness of the chase, and focused on healing. They needed to save as many as possible. It was safe to say that he saved the heroes. She was almost sure that without him they would have died. Perhaps they would have even been defeated, but he acted like a true savior, not thinking about himself. Yusako cried. He was only 17 and terribly afraid of demons and the dead, but thanks to this meeting he found his place and became happier. Rose had seen such people before, but they remained only in memories, and she was glad that he returned alive, not becoming another ghost of the past. He collapsed unconscious from exhaustion. His body finally gave in, and he urgently needed rest to regain his strength. He sits next to the bear and tells in detail what happened, for example, how he stood in front of a huge crowd and was terribly nervous. His heart was pounding wildly, and his palms became sweaty from fear, and then the commander suddenly hit him, leaving him in complete confusion. The bear also noticeably gained weight while he was away. His sides became rounded, and his movements became more awkward, which caused laughter from those around him. Gomo arrives and explains with a serious expression that they urgently want to see him from the castle, and the matter, apparently, does not tolerate delay. He was advised not to go through the city, since the path was dangerous and swarmed with ill-wishers, but he ignored the warnings and went anyway, risking himself. And many curious people immediately gathered around him, vying with each other to offer him various juicy fruits, as if trying to appease or distract him. Aruka sincerely thanks him, because he, risking his life, saved his comrades, and now they owe him eternal loyalty. We unexpectedly learn that he, it turns out, is both a skilled swordsman and a powerful magician, so it was so easy and natural to become a knight, without encountering any obstacles on his way. Lloyd, with anxiety in his voice, asked for help, because they urgently needed to interrogate the Black Knight, and apparently, without his participation it was impossible. She, to everyone's surprise, willingly answered all the questions asked, but there was something important to find out: the source of her incredible power, which could change the course of the war. She, smiling mysteriously, wanted to meet him in person, as if there was some invisible connection between them. Sunzen resolutely accompanies him, because if she gives something, then she will certainly beat him for it later, such is her contradictory nature. Siglis worriedly tells that the Black Knight has a clear inclination to dark magic, and apparently, the healing magic has already done its job, stopping the spread of sinister energy. Yusato quickly ran to her, because she had serious injuries, and she was in terrible pain, although now she finally learned what real pain is, and it changed her. She raised her head with difficulty, and whispered that she wanted to look again at the face of the guy who did this to her, turning her life into hell. She slowly extends her trembling hand to him, and the boy, without thinking, begins to heal her, realizing that if he lets her die, it will leave a bad aftertaste in his soul. She suddenly feels warm from this gesture, and he, feeling relieved, finishes the ritual, leaning back. She, wide-eyed, admits that this is the first time she has felt such a strange but pleasant sensation, and timidly asks him to sit next to her for a little longer, so as not to be alone. Rose, crossing her arms over her chest, decides to train him personally and sternly announces that she wants to teach him a couple of important things, because she will return soon, and he needs to be fully prepared for this. To do this, it is necessary to go through a certain path of trials, and she needs her to beat him without mercy, because he relies too much on healing magic, forgetting about other skills. Rose patiently explains that if the wound was caused by a cursed weapon, then it is impossible to heal it with magic, and the only way is to dodge, but first she will start with simple blows so that he will feel the difference. She suddenly grabs him and throws him up, but he, turning in the air, lands on his feet, but the next moment she hits him in the stomach, knocking all the air out of him. He wakes up screaming and rubs his stomach, thinking that it was just a bad dream, But then Rose comes through the door, who mercilessly destroys his last hopes, stating that the training is just beginning. Yusato, limping, comes to his enemy and with resentment in his voice complains about Rose, who seems to enjoy his torment. The Black Knight, tilting his head to the side, does not understand why he came to her, because there is nothing in common between them. He only shrugs and leaves her, because he was asked to, not wanting to continue a pointless conversation. The boy, left alone, recalls the recent battle and 3 mysterious balls that Kazuki once created appear before his eyes, leaving behind only questions. They sit down tiredly near the fountain, and they excitedly tell him that the enemy was brought to tears, which no one expected, given his cruelty. Celia, smiling softly, says that her father was sincerely grateful for the valuable information they received, and now he trusts them even more than before. She was also told that if it were not for his intervention, they would have suffered a crushing defeat, and the consequences would be irreversible. The protagonist became curious about what would happen to their enemy now, because she seemed to have answered all the questions, and her further fate remained a mystery. Rose suddenly comes to her on Lloyd's orders, and she had only 2 options to choose from: either spend the rest of her life in a dark cell, or she will take her under her wing and turn her into a normal demon, giving her a chance at redemption. Rose, without wasting time, sharply hits her on the head, and she instantly begins to feel dizzy. The world around her blurs before her eyes. They roughly remove her armor, because the strange device hidden under it sealed her true essence, and it was a pity to spend precious money on its maintenance, so they decided to make her a worthy demon useful to society. Yusato, breathing heavily, runs with the bear around the yard so that he instantly loses weight, because his obesity has become a real problem for movement. Rose unexpectedly comes, because she strictly told him to rest, but he, as always, does not listen to her instructions. A small demon sits carefree on her shoulder, who, as it turns out, will now be a servant in their house, and she will also be responsible for her training, teaching her all the necessary skills. Rose is writing something intently in her notebook when the protagonist quietly approaches her, not daring to interrupt her thoughts. We learn that the Black Knight was initially unhappy with her position, but after a long bath with aromatic herbs, she became noticeably calmer, because she has not yet realized her new position and what awaits her ahead. Lloyd, leaning over the map, decided to conclude an alliance with all neighboring countries, and for this it was necessary to urgently send ambassadors capable of negotiating with the rulers. 3 guys were chosen as ambassadors, who had already managed to prove themselves in difficult situations and earn trust. The girl with a serious expression on her face explains that King Lloyd firmly believes that he is the one who will cope with this mission, because the fate of the entire kingdom is at stake, and failure is impossible. He is solemnly handed the letters when 2 little girls run into the room and, smiling, wish him luck with his job in the rescue team, because they believe in him. The people of the kingdom, to his surprise, turned out to be unusually kind and responsive, and the letters needed to be delivered as soon as possible to protect everyone from the impending threat. Unexpectedly, Susan comes, because this, as she mysteriously says, is his fate, and it is useless to resist it. He suddenly saw a little fox flashing in the bushes, and without thinking, he ran after her, carefully picking her up in his arms so as not to scare her. Amako, trembling with excitement, asks him to save her mother as gratitude for his past help, and in her eyes one can read boundless hope. He lets her go, and she asks to discuss the rest in private. The Black Knight runs when the men overtake her. She falls to the ground and cannot get up, when suddenly Rose hits her, forcing her to run again. They sit at the table, trying to calmly talk. Amako knew a lot about them and specifically showed him the events that could destroy the kingdom. The girl was looking for a healer and left the lands of the Beastborn to save her mother. Since only humans were healers, she continued her search. She did not take Yururu and Orb with her, because they did not know how to fight. Rose refused her with one look, so only the boy remained, to whom she showed the events. She asks him to go with her and save his mother. Yusato agrees since they still need to deliver mail and they can stop by on the way, but first they need to consult with the commander. The girl decides to report this girl to the king, because a war could start because of her, but he may well go to that kingdom. He returns, and Amako, foreseeing everything, says that they need to wait. They thank each other for their help. The men eat, and the girl is embarrassed, but Yusato persuades her to eat, otherwise she will faint. He gives her a diary, advising her to write down her affairs to make it easier. The Black Knight begins to eat, and she likes the food. On the 2nd day, she decides to keep a diary and describes how she ran, and the men laughed, kicking her. On the 5th day, the protagonist ran with them, but something was wrong, he was not even out of breath. On the 10th day, she hears a noise from the thicket and tries to run away to check, but sees Rose hitting her. She screams that she needs to dodge, and Yusato does not understand how to do this if the blows change trajectory. The girl was unable to hit him the first time, but the second blow landed accurately. Noticing the Black Knight, she orders her to obey the protagonist. A bear cub runs up to them and they are about to leave, but the girl asks about something, and he runs away. Rose eats, and is told about the Black Knight, after which she is asked to bring her dinner. The men laugh when a spoon flies into the protagonist, slightly wounding him. As a result, he became kinder, as did they themselves. The Black Knight was hungry and tried to eavesdrop on the guys. The next day, she runs away from them. Yusato goes with Amako to the king. He bends down and thanks for his help, promising support in return. Lloyd decides that during his journey he will visit several countries, including the lands of the Beastborn, and Wellesley will tell him the details. They walk along the corridor, and they explain the route to him: Magic Liquid, the country of Vesamoriel, the Water Myrak, and the lands of the Beastborn. Two will go with him, and he chooses Aruka. Amako was running through the forest when Rose kicked her, thinking she had escaped. She wasn't afraid for Yusato. His healing abilities were almost equal to her own, and it was hard to hurt him. She was sitting by a tree, and the protagonist came up to her. She was sad because he was leaving and he would be lonely, and it was unfair that he would come out of this ordeal unscathed. Rose wanted to tell her that healing magic was considered weak by many, but if he met such people, he should not hold back and beat the crap out of them. This trip was supposed to change him. Yusato was happy he was an ordinary guy, but now he trusted her and respected her as a mentor. Yurura and Org wish him luck and asked him to get enough sleep. Amako hugs the saleswoman goodbye. Celia asks him to take care of himself and come back with good news. The gate opens, and he wonders what lies ahead. The Black Knight approaches Rose, who looks at the departing carriage and smiles. The girl shouts that there is no need to idle. The boys look at him. He will see new lands for the first time, and adventures full of dangers await him. He has become the new hero of this world. Sitting in the carriage, he thinks about the upcoming travels.